If you're doing the pigeon pose as part of your stretching routine, stop and do this instead. So we're gonna take a look here at what was taught to me as the piriformis stretch. And this is kind of like a cross between a 90-90 and a pigeon pose. Now, in my opinion, this is a far superior variation to the pigeon pose, and I'm gonna explain why in just a second. So how we're gonna get set up in the position is by starting in a traditional 90-90 with a 90-degree angle in both of our knees. Then from here, we're going to extend that rear leg as straight as we can. And this is the key to the stretch here, while keeping the front leg at a 90-degree angle. We're gonna take our pelvis and we're gonna internally rotate it towards the floor or even towards that lead leg if you have that ability. And a quick pro tip for beginners, if you're really struggling to keep your knee flat on the floor as you're moving into that internally rotated position, you are gonna get a lot of benefit from using a block or a foam roller or some sort of support that you can really press your weight into to just elevate that knee. And this is basically just gonna mimic like an incline piriformis or pigeon stretch position. Just give you a little bit more support at the knee and allow you to find a position of rest with your knee elevated off the floor. Now you might say that this looks a lot like a pigeon pose, and you would be right, except the main difference here is that we're being very strict and intentional on our front leg positioning, making sure that we're maintaining a 90-degree angle at that front knee, and also keeping the thigh pointing relatively straight forward so that we can really get a lot deeper into the posterior hip capsule, the smaller and deeper muscles like the piriformis, for example, as well as the tendons and the ligaments. So from this position, you will be locked into the stretch, and we're gonna really wanna emphasize rotating towards that front leg. And we can start by just settling into the stretch here, taking some nice big deep breaths in and out, and trying to ease our way a little deeper into the stretch. Now, if we're looking to increase the stretch sensation, we can lean our chest forwards towards the floor. And one big key here is that we're not just rounding our spine, but we're actually being very intentional about trying to maintain more of an anterior pelvic tilt and really keeping the spine as straight as possible as we're leaning forward. And if you're doing that correctly, you should definitely feel a difference between the two. And if you really want to take it one step further, we can then take our arm and thread it through the opposite arm and just really emphasize that rotation towards the front leg. And trust me, that is going to amplify the intensity big time. Now, this stretch will commonly be prescribed in what's called a crack method. And crack just stands for contract, relax, agonist, contract, which is just a big fancy way of saying that we're creating contractions on both sides of the joint and creating some relaxed phases in between those contractions to just allow us to explore deeper into the stretch. So the first step in this 4-step process is going to be creating an antagonist contraction, which means contracting against the stretch. How we're gonna wanna do that is by taking our front knee and driving it down into the floor or support if we're using a block underneath the knee, and really pressing in there as if to try and lift your hips up off the floor. And then as soon as we're done with that contract phase, we're going to take a big breath out, try to relax a little deeper into the stretch and see if we can explore deeper ranges. Then the other contraction we're gonna be doing from here is an agonist contraction, which means contracting with the stretch. And how we're gonna wanna do that is by thinking about using our hips to lift our knee up towards our chest, really contracting the hips there. And again, once you have held that for the prescribed amount of time, we're taking a big deep breath out, just seeing if we can move any deeper into the stretch before our next contraction, if it is prescribed. Now, you may have noticed me talking about prescriptions a lot in this video, like holding contractions for the prescribed amount of time or doing the prescribed amount of intervals of contract, relax. The reason for that is because I'm also using this content candidly in my training app for my clients. Sometimes I prescribe the exercise a little bit differently to different people, but this video is also for you, YouTube, and so I'm going to be going over a few different prescriptions for beginner, intermediate, and advanced, giving you some different considerations that we might want to think about when we're actually implementing this stretch on our own. So generally speaking, we're looking to accumulate around 2 to 3 minutes of time under tension spent in the position. Now, at a more beginner level, that's gonna be pretty fucking tough to do all in one set. And so At a more beginner level, when we don't have as much conditioning to the stretched position, we're probably going to want to break that time up into multiple sets. So my recommendation at a more beginner level, again, would be to start with 3 sets of 45 seconds per side, starting with 15 seconds of just settling into the stretch passively, and then doing 1 round of the crack method in intervals of 5-second contractions and 10-second relax phases. And again, because we're doing contractions on both sides of the joint, 1 round of the crack method is going to take you 30 seconds because we're doing a contract for 5, relax for 10, contract for 5, relax for 10. Now at a more intermediate level, as we start to develop a bit more conditioning to this stretch and the stretch position in general, then we can actually start to increase the duration of our sets, and potentially, depending on how far you're going, we can limit the amount of sets that we're actually doing. So for example, we could bump that up to 3 sets of 1 minute per side, which would then be settling into the stretch for 30 seconds to begin with, then doing 1 round of the crack method. Or we can then potentially move up to holding sets of 90 seconds, maybe upwards of 2 to 3 minutes. So let's say we're going for 90 seconds. In that case, we would settle into the stretch for 30 seconds and then do 2 rounds of the crack method for the remaining 60 seconds. And again, because we're going for around 3 minutes of time under tension, we would only really need to do 2 sets of 90 seconds, and then you have the time that you need. But at a more advanced level, we're definitely going to want to try and build the conditioning to be able to hold the position for 1 larger set of 2 to 3 minutes at a time. Now, the longer that we're spending in the stretch, the more we're going to want to settle into the stretch passively on the front half of that set. So for example, let's say we're going with a 2-minute set. In that case, we might want to start with 60 seconds settling into the stretch passively, starting at a low intensity threshold and then gradually ramping up and accumulating that stretch sensation. And then for the remaining 60 seconds, we can do 2 rounds of the crack method. And then from there on outward, you probably just want to add rounds of the crack method rather than adding more time on the front end. So if we want a 3-minute set, that will look like 60 seconds settling into the stretch and then 4 rounds of the crack method in intervals, again, of 5 seconds on, 10 seconds off. And I know this probably sounds awfully confusing initially, but I promise you, once you get on the floor, you get in the position and you start working your way through that crack method I showed you, it is going to become a lot easier to understand and you'll pick it up very quickly. But if you have any questions about this, drop them in the comments section below so that I can try and get back to you. If you liked this video and it was helpful for you, please hit that like button to just help boost it in the algorithm a little bit and get it out to more people who need it. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more flexibility content just like this. I'll see you in the next one, maestros.